Good morning and welcome to the First Unitarian Society of Madison. My name is Kelly Crocker and I am one of the ministers here. Today I'm joined by my colleague, the Reverend Kelly Asprooth-Jackson, and the worship team of Drew Collins and Daniel Carnes. A special welcome and thanks to Michael Beebe, our guest musician today. Thank you, Michael, as well as to our society choir. Thank you all for being here. At First Unitarian Society, we question boldly, listen humbly, grow spiritually, act courageously, and love unapologetically. If you're visiting us today, welcome. We're so very glad that you are with us. If you would like more information about our activities and programs, please stop by the welcome table after service. It is through these doors to your right, next to the elevator. We also hope that you'll be able to stay and join us for coffee hour immediately following today's service, also in the Commons. For those of you connecting with us virtually today, we are glad that you are with us as well. We hope that you'll be able to take a moment and watch the announcement slides immediately following today's service to find out more about what's happening here at FUS. We have two special announcements this morning. First is that our Autumn Fest Cabaret is coming up quickly on Saturday, October 21st from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. It is an all-day event that features our annual cabaret auction, the raffles, also games and food trucks and crafts, music for the whole family, and once again, Haven's Petting Farm will be with us. So if you're looking for me on Saturday, October 21st, I will be holding a baby goat out on the lawn from 11 a.m. until 4 p.m. If you would like to donate to the auction, volunteer for the event, or purchase tickets, you can go to fusmadison.org/cabaret, or you could look for Cheryl Mellentine in the Commons. She's gonna stick her head in right now so you know who she is. That's Cheryl. Thank you, Cheryl. One other announcement is that this morning our holidays and holy day students are learning about the Chinese dragon celebration. They will be creating their own dragon and they will have a parade in the Commons during coffee hour. So please keep an eye out for a large dragon made up of lots of little feet, and show them your appreciation and your joy as they come by. And now I invite you to join me in a moment of silence as we center ourselves and bring ourselves fully into this time, joining together once again in community. Come one, come all.
Come with your missing pieces and your extra screws. Come with your hard edges and your soft spots. Come with your bowed heads and upright spines. Come, all you flamboyant and drab, verbose and quiet, fidgeting and lethargic.
All you with large vision and tender hearts. All you with small courage and tender fears. Bring your lisp and your stutter and your song. Bring your gravel and your drawl and your lilt. Bring your anger and your joy and your righteous indignation.
Misfits and conformists and everyone in between, come into this space and be welcome.
Bring who you are, bring where you've traveled, bring what you long for. Come, let us worship together. And we invite you now to rise in all the ways we do and join together in our words of affirmation as we light our chalice. With this familiar, simple act, we welcome the light of the flame. We welcome the heat from its glow. We welcome each other into this sacred hour together.
And now let's sing together our opening hymn, number 1007, There's a River Flowing in My Soul. Please be seated.
Well, friends, I want to invite forward really anybody who wants to come up and hear a story this morning. Howdy, y'all. Good morning to you.
How many candles do you have?
Do I have in total? I didn't count them. I'll tell you that honestly. I counted the ones I lit, but not everybody. I'm sorry?
Are there 3 bears in this?
There are not 3 bears, but I see you reading ahead. So, I have a question for you before we get to the story, but it does sort of connect to the story a little bit. Here's the question that I have for you. We are near the end of a celebration this week. I'm wondering if anybody knows what celebration I'm thinking of. Who's it? That's coming up. The Autumn Fest Cabaret is coming up in just 2 weekends, so yeah, that's good. 9 candles? Oh,
But in 2
okay.
weeks, I'm going to be in Massachusetts.
Oh, well, I'm sorry, you'll have to miss it. Yes.
Is it opposite Goldilocks and the Three Bears?
Is it opposite Goldilocks and the Three Bears? I'm trying to think of, is there a way I can connect this story to Goldilocks and the Three Bears? I'm not sure that there is. Here's
Trees travel than the bear. Those can be Goldilocks travelers.
Goldilocks Travelers. Okay, here's what it is. Here's the celebration I've been thinking of. Do you know that this week is still for a couple more days, Fat Bear Week?
Yes, I knew it was that.
Yes? Some people have heard about this. So Fat Bear Week is it's an event organized by Katmai National Park, which is in Alaska. Now, human bodies can be all sorts of shapes and sizes. They're all worthy of celebration. They're all beautiful. There's a reason why we celebrate the fatness of bears during Fat Bear Week. Do you know why?
Because it's
Yeah?
because it's turning into winter.
Right. It's getting to be time for winter. That means it's time for the bears to hibernate, and they need
For them to get fat.
they need to accumulate as many calories as possible, store them away in fat. That's what fat is. It's stored calories. Yes?
And then they'll freeze.
Well, so that they don't freeze, so that they can stay hibernating all winter long and live healthy, productive lives. Yes?
Did you know beavers need to always... So here's how beavers are allowed to hibernate. You
Yes.
know, if beavers don't eat enough trees, then they'll never be able to eat again because their teeth grow too long.
Ah,
They
yes.
don't grow.
So while beavers are hibernating, their teeth don't grow. I didn't know that, but it does make sense. So, because it's Fat Bear Week, in honor of Fat Bear Week, I want to tell you this story that has a bear in it. So, once upon a time, there were two travelers. Two travelers. So, I need a name for the first traveler. What's the first traveler's name? Bob. Bob is the first traveler. Great. I need a name for the second traveler. What's the second traveler's name? Billy. Okay, so Bob and Billy are traveling through the forest together.
Why does it need to be the forest? Why can't the bear be in...
Actually, the forest part is going to be important in a second. You're going to find out why. So, Bob and Billy traveling through the forest, and along comes a bear. Now, they're both very concerned about this bear. So, Bob climbs a tree. This is why the forest part is important.
Also, why does the bear have two legs and the people are like this?
It's just because it's hard for me to do 4 legs with one hand. So the Bob, very worried about the bear, runs right away to the tree, climbs up the tree, hides in the tree. Billy is sort of caught flat-footed and decides to lie down and play dead. And so Bob is watching the bear creep up on Billy, who's just lying there on the ground. But the bear doesn't do anything bad to Billy. Nothing bad happens to Billy in this story.
Of course it doesn't.
The bear just goes over to Billy and whispers something in his ear, and then goes somewhere else, and that's the end of the bear part of the story. So now Bob comes back out of the tree and says, "Hey, Billy, what did the bear say to you?" And what do you think the bear said?
I think it said that... Nothing. Bears can't talk. Yeah, no, nothing. Bears can't talk.
That's a fair insight, and yet in this story, the bear did talk. Yes.
Okay, then it says growl, 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 growl.
Well, what the bear said in this story is, it's not a good idea to go walking in the woods with someone who'll run away at the first sign of trouble. So the lesson that I take from this story is the importance of having good friends who will stick by us even in difficult times and challenging situations.
It was a very short story.
It was a very short story. You're right about that.
We need another one. We need another one.
Well,
Three Goldilocks and one bear.
perhaps there will be another story in your future.
Do the three Goldilocks and bear and the bear. Do the mermaid and the three crabs.
And with that, we're going to sing you to your classes.
Do the mermaid and the three crabs.
Let's sing the children to their classes. They shall go out with joy and be led forth with peace. The mountains and the hills will break forth before you. There'll be shouts of joy, and all the trees of the field will clap, of the field will clap their hands. The trees of the field will clap their hands while you go out with joy.
Had them eating right out of your hand, didn't you? It's one of the best parts of our job, honestly. I now invite you into the giving and the receiving of today's offering. We give freely and generously to this offering, which supports the ongoing work of this community and also the work of our outreach offering recipient, who this week is the Wisconsin Network for Peace and Justice. WNPJ was founded in 1991 as a coalition of activist groups and citizens of conscience within Wisconsin. It works to advance a sustainable world free from violence and injustice by connecting, engaging, and strengthening member groups and serving as a catalyst for community organizing and education. You'll see on the screen that you can donate directly from our website, fusmadison.org. You'll see the text to give information there as well, and there are baskets being passed here in the room. We thank you for your generosity and your faith in this life we create together.
While I run this race, Lordy, guide my feet. While I run this race, Lordy, guide my feet. While I run this race, for I don't want to run this race in vain. Race in vain. Hold my hand. While I run this race, Lord, hold my hand. While I run this race, Lord, hold my hand. While I run this race, for I don't want to run this race in vain. Race in vain. Stand by me while I run this race, Lord, stand by me. While I run this race, Lord, stand by me. While I run this race, for I don't want to run this race in vain. Race in vain. Search my heart while I run this race, Lord. Search my heart while I run this race, Lord. Search my heart while I run this race, for I don't want to run this race in vain. Race in vain.
Thank you very much for that. Thank you. So there was a certain woman who was a member and a leader in a congregation that I once served. She was and is ethnically Armenian and was raised in the Armenian Orthodox Church. Her family lived in the suburbs of Chicago, and the drive to the nearest Armenian church was a long one, especially for a young child who was perhaps not naturally excited about the prospect of attending church in general. In her telling of the story, their lengthy Sunday morning drive took them past a different religious building, much, much closer to their home. It was a Unitarian congregation. Based on the geography, I'm pretty sure it was Unity Temple, our sibling congregation, which, like us, has the complex privilege of being housed in a building designed by Frank Lloyd Wright. But I could be wrong about that. She remembers asking her mother, "Why don't we just go there? It's so much closer." Her mother explained that they weren't going there because that was a Unitarian church, and they weren't Unitarians. They were Armenian Orthodox, so they were going to the Armenian Orthodox Church. "Well, what's a Unitarian then?" my former congregant asked. To which her mother replied, "Well, when a Jew and a Catholic fall in love and get married, they go join the Unitarians." This is just one example of something that I think most of us already know. That we have a reputation as a religious movement of being a place for folks who aren't welcome in a lot of other religious spaces in America. And there are multiple explanations for that. Our core value of recognizing and defending the infinite worthiness in every person. Our oft-repeated principle that we need not think alike to love alike. And our valuing of reason as a critical component to religious life, such that it may be used to challenge existing doctrines and overcome old prejudices. But one of the simplest explanations is, for me, one of the most compelling and important. We let in atheists. Now, we haven't always. 150 years ago, any of our congregations would have balked at the idea that atheism could be an acceptable theological position for a Unitarian or a Universalist to hold. It's only really in the last 100 years that any form of non-theism could be said to be fully tolerated in our movement, and its official acceptance didn't truly arrive until the consolidation between the Unitarians and the Universalists in 1961. But still, since well before I was born, it's been part of the shorthand that folks know about us in the wider culture. Now, it is very possible to make far, far too much out of the low esteem that atheists, agnostics, and other non-theists are held in America. I say this as someone who belongs to that very broad category. We do not experience systemic oppression of the type or magnitude that many other people with other identities do in this country. But it is the case today, and was even more true 40, 50, 60 years ago, that the overwhelming number of religious communities in America do not offer a place of acceptance and inclusion for atheists. In fact, when I explain our tradition to strangers, as I am often called on to do, I generally say that one of the unique or nearly unique qualities we have as a spiritual movement is that we welcome and include both atheists and theists, and that neither position has any inherent superiority or inferiority within our religion as it is currently organized. And this, on the basis of anecdotes too numerous to count, is where I see our inclusive reputation actually playing out in practice. Again and again, individuals and families who had been made to feel or told directly that they did not have a place in their communities of origin chose to give us a try. Multi-faith couples, multiracial couples, gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender people, neurologically diverse people, women who held to the radical idea that they were full and complete persons. Each thought to themselves, they'll take in atheists, and nobody likes them. so maybe they'll take me too. I'm not trying to paint a rosy picture here. We have not always lived up to that maybe. I celebrate the places where our welcome to the religiously marginalized has been fulfilled, and I lament the places where it has failed. Sometimes, where we have succeeded, it has been more for being the least bad option than for being the most good. And as some other religious institutions in this country have expanded their hearts and become more inclusive, especially of LGBTQ plus folks, we have sometimes seemed confused as to why some folks weren't picking us at the same rate for the low offer of, I guess it's okay if you're here. This month, our spiritual theme is welcome. And we're going to spend a lot of time next week talking about welcome as a practice within our community, of living up to the high promise of our almost accidental reputation as a place that welcomes in the spiritually marginalized. But I'm starting us out today with these thoughts about our legacy of welcoming profoundly unwelcome people, because I believe it also has deep implications for our outward-facing work, for the changes we seek to make in the larger world. And so for the rest of this message, I want to focus on a class of human beings who are among the most dehumanized in the eyes of our society: people in prison. Now, as a metaphor, prison is a common fixture in our literature and in our speech. It's used to describe any sort of difficult or desperate situation where the options become narrowed to the point of having no choice at all. We talk about the prison of poverty, the prison of ignorance. The Eagles sang about drug addiction as being prisoners of our own device. Some religious and philosophical outlooks view the body itself as a prison, restraining the mind or the soul and keeping it from achieving its full potential. To be in prison, so the metaphor goes, is to be unable to pursue one's own sense of purpose. Malcolm X, who spent 6 years in Charlestown State Prison, wrote many years after his release, "Any person who claims to have deep feeling for other human beings should think a long time before he votes to have other men kept behind bars, caged. I am not saying there shouldn't be prisons, but there shouldn't be bars. Behind bars, a man never reforms. He will never forget. He will never get completely over the memory of the bars. To be imprisoned is to have one's ambition, one's calling, thwarted and blocked." So the word prison stands in as a placeholder for any condition or situation in which there is a loss of self-determination. In our society, it is most often invoked as a metaphor by people who are distant and aloof from the actual literal place that is prison and the experience of it. The recent popularity, well, relatively recent, I should say, of the program Orange is the New Black, most certainly notwithstanding, much of the point of prisons as they currently function in America is to place certain people at a far remove from the rest of the community. This was not always the case. Some of you have heard me talk before about the very early days of Christian religious life in New England, the soil out of which the main line of our Unitarian ancestors in America emerged. In the first towns settled by Europeans, there was only one place of worship, and attendance was mandatory. That mandate applied as much to folks in jail as it did to everyone else. So each Sunday, the prisoners would be led to the meeting house and sit in the same room and hear the same preaching as everyone else in town. And because the discussion of the gospel was considered essential to the very early Puritans, those prisoners had the same chance to speak in church as everyone else did. Some used that opportunity to speak what lesson they found in the readings for that day, and sometimes the lesson they found had to do with their current situation and why they ought to be let out of it. But that is a far and a distant cry from the situation of the modern prison. More than to reform, even more than to punish, though certainly it is a punishing place, the modern prison system serves as a means to throw people away, to disconnect them from the communities and relationships that all human beings need in order to manifest and reinforce our own humanity, and to place them out of sight and out of mind. There are some terrible crimes for which people do go to jail, and I do not mean to pretend that every soul in prison is innocent, although we also know, as a matter of simple statistical fact, that not everyone in prison is guilty either. But as a society, we have lost our sense of relationship to the prisoner, to the point where, even once released, having paid one's debt to society, as we say, a felony conviction remains an eternal blot on a human life. It allows for all manner of legal and social discrimination. Eugene Victor Debs, the international labor organizer and four-time candidate for the U.S. presidency, the last of those campaigns conducted while he was in prison himself, famously said, "So long as there is a minority, I am in it. So long as there is a criminal element, I am of it. So long as there is a soul in prison, I am not free." The institution of the prison, as it currently exists in this country, can only really be explained in this way: that those of us who make the system of incarceration possible, with our labor, with our tax dollars, or simply with our non-interference, proceed with the expectation that we and the people we love will never be subject to it. If we all actually believed that any and all of us could be imprisoned at some point in our lives, the institution would necessarily undergo a radical transformation. In 1995, Tupac Shakur was one of the biggest names in hip-hop in the whole of the American popular music scene, in fact. He was also in the midst of a 9-month prison stint. He was the first artist, in fact, to have an album reach #1 on the Billboard charts while incarcerated. A prison is, by design and intent, a grim and unkind place. No matter the circumstances that bring a person to that place, it is a hard and painful thing for a human being to live in a cage. After his release, Tupac was asked in interviews about his experience in prison. He talked about the authors he'd read, Sun Tzu and Niccolò Machiavelli. He offered his thanks to his friends, family, fellow artists who had supported him. But there was one name on the list who stuck out, at least to me, as sort of an odd duck: Tony Danza. For those of you who don't know, Tony Danza was a rather famous actor in his day. You know, he's still working today. He's still reasonably famous. He had a couple of very successful TV shows tending to play big-hearted, quick-witted, working-class characters. He was not, however, someone that you might have expected to find in the middle 90s in the orbit of the gangsta rap genre. But like much of America, he had listened to Tupac's music. And knowing that the poet was then behind bars, he felt moved to write to him. Not just a small note, long, deep letters, more than one. And receiving those letters from a stranger that he didn't know from Adam clearly meant something to Tupac Shakur. Up until his death, far too soon and far too young, Tupac continued to talk in interviews about his gratitude to and appreciation for Tony, a man he hadn't known before and whom he now considered a friend. I noted before that not everyone who is sent to prison is guilty of whatever crime they are convicted of. And while the travesty of that, as well as the gross disproportionality of incarceration based on race and income, motivates me very deeply, even if it doesn't motivate you, we still both are faced with this ringing question. Our tradition affirms the infinite worthiness of every human being. What then is our responsibility to people whose worth has been denigrated and rejected by the official mechanisms of our society? What is our duty to people in prison? One answer I would offer you is that we as a congregation are already members of Moses, which stands for Madison Organizing in Strength, Equity, and Solidarity. Moses is an interfaith organizing group under the statewide umbrella of an organization called Wisdom, most of whose affiliates, like ours, use names drawn from the Hebrew Bible through truly heroic feats of acronym construction. In organizing together to work for transformative justice, Moses, in the words of its own website, starts with the issues of mass incarceration and mass supervision, which negatively and disproportionately impact people of color, people with mental health issues, and people living in poverty. The description continues. Our work goes beyond criminal justice reform. We, as participants in the historic struggle to overcome white supremacy and systemic racism, seek to dismantle this unjust and unsustainable system. We believe that effective reforms will ultimately allow a reallocation of public resources for the well-being of communities and families, and will lead to a beloved community where all can thrive. One of our ministry teams is devoted specifically to maintaining our relationship with Moses and helping and encouraging us to engage with their calls for action. Members of our Moses team will be out in the Commons today and are excited to talk with you about ways to get involved in their activities and potentially to even join that team. There is a particular opportunity to take action in just the next few days that I want to make sure you're aware of. This coming Tuesday, October 10th at noon at the state capitol, specifically the State Street corner, members of Moses and Wisdom will be holding a rally and a press conference and a march to the governor's office. This will be to bring attention and call for change on the conditions of unsafety, deplorable hygiene, and fundamental mistreatment at the state prison facilities in Waupun and Green Bay. This includes persistent vermin infestation, a gross understaffing relative to the prison population, which makes things much more dangerous, both for prisoners and for those who work in the prisons. And a many months-long state of lockdown, leading to incarcerated people being unable to receive visits from their families, time outside their cells radically constricted, and showers limited to once per week. I know that the timing will not work for every one of us, but I hope that if you are able, you will spare an hour or two from your busy day and join me in bearing witness for people who, whatever the severity of their actions, are still people and deserve to be treated as such. Towards the end of his life, in his essay, This Far and No Further, the luminary author and social critic James Baldwin wrote about his experiences and observations from visiting people in prison, both as a journalist and as a friend. He said in that piece, "The incarceration of the prisoner reveals nothing about the prisoner, but reveals volumes concerning those who hold the keys." Our system of prisons in this country and here in Wisconsin acts in all of our names. In some sense, we do collectively hold the keys. If we would like for it to say something better about us than it currently does, it is up to all of us to act.
Thank you. Each week we gather, carrying with us the joys and the sorrows of our recent days. We share these here, knowing they are held in love. We light a candle of brokenheartedness for the new and terrible step we have witnessed in the last day in the cycle of violence in Israel and Palestine. With humility for the scope of a complex and deeply ingrained conflict, we pour out our grief for the most vulnerable, for children, elders, the sick, and disabled. However far away it may seem, we persist in hoping for a world in which every person and every people can be at home, be free, and be safe. And we light another candle of grief for the Armenian population of Nagorno-Karabakh, forced to flee their homes in order to live in recent days. Again, in the midst of a broken world, we affirm that it can and must become a better home to children and to all living things. And we light a candle of memory, love, and gratitude for the life of Genevieve Edwards Miller, who passed away on Thursday. Genevieve was a creative and kind soul, and she is deeply missed. We send our love to her husband, Don, her daughter, Florence, her grandchildren, and to all who are missing Jen today. And in our Cares of the Congregation book, we light a candle to send energy to the exhausted parents. We need it. Amen. And to remember and pray for Chris and Boo as Boo enters hospice. If you join me now in a moment of meditation with these words from Teresa Novak. Come into this moment. There are healing waters here and hands with soothing balm to ease your troubled days. Bring your wounds and aching hearts, your scars too numb to feel, your questions and complaints, they are all welcome here. Rest a while. Let the warmth of this community surround you, hold you, heal you. When you feel stronger just a bit, notice those who need you too. They are here, they are everywhere. Weep with them, smile with them, work with them, laugh along the way. Pass the cup, drink the holy fire, take it with you into the world. We are saved, and we save each other again, again, and yet again. Blessed be, and amen.
And now let's rise in body and/or in spirit to sing together our closing hymn, number 349 in the gray hymnal, We Gather Together.
Acclaim
forth, because we are always going forth from somewhere, going from our homes, our childhood, cities, countries, going from innocence to experience to enlightenment, going into mystery and questions, going into the desert, getting to the other side. Go forth, leave behind the comfort and community of one place and head into the anxiety and loneliness of another. Carry with you the love and laughter of this place and let it light your way. Carry with you the wisdom you learned and the good memories. May they give you strength for the journey. And when you've been away long enough, far enough, done what you'd set off to do, been there so long that that place too starts to feel like home, come back. Come back to the one universal, everywhere and every when and everyone inclusive home, this beloved community of all creation that you can never really leave. Blessed be, go in peace, and please be seated for the postlude.
That's a great thing about our service. Almost anything's gonna work. Hey, how are you, Allison? All right, thank you.